Today we're reacting to an ESPN debate about the Pittsburgh Steelers, focusing on their head coach situation and what this decision could mean for the future of the franchise. It's one of those moments that can really change the direction of a BM team. If you enjoy NFL reaction content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe.
We've got breaking news out of the NFL where the Steelers are working to hire Mike McCarthy as their next head coach. That's the latest from our Jonathan Jones. The Pittsburgh native is expected to replace Mike Tomlin, who stepped down earlier this month after 19 seasons with the Steelers. McCarthy was most recently the coach of the Cowboys for 5 years before being fired at the end of the 2024 season. Prior to that, he was in charge of the Packers for 13 years, winning a Super Bowl during the 2010 season. McCarthy is set to be the Steelers' fourth head coach since 1969. All three coaches before him won a Super Bowl during their time in Steel City. And for more, we got to welcome in Lee J. Douzable and Emery Hunt. Fellas, thanks for hopping on to break down this breaking news. Look, this makes McCarthy just the fourth Steelers head coach since 1969, since basically the moon landing. You had Noel, Cowher, Tomlin, and now McCarthy. Lee, initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, not overly surprised, but a little bit surprised, Mark, because to your point, he's only the fourth coach in Steelers history. And when you look at what they've done, their criteria as far as who they've picked, it's been younger defensive coordinators. I believe Bill Cowher was only 34 years old. Mike Tomlin was only 34 years old. And Mike McCarthy is about double that age. He's at 62. But this is a Super Bowl winning coach. A guy, to your point, is from the area. So from that standpoint, I think the Steelers looked at this and said, when you look at all the available potential head coaching candidates, he's the cream of the crop. This is a guy that has won a Super Bowl. When you go back to his tenure in Dallas, from 21 to 23, he had 36 wins. Only Andy Reid had more in that span. And then even when Kellen Moore left as offensive coordinator and went to the Chargers, remember, he took over the offense. The Dallas Cowboys were the #1 offense in football. Matter of fact, Dak Prescott was #2 in that year in the MVP voting. So I like it from a standpoint, getting a guy that has a ton of experience, a local guy, so you know that he'll love to be back home coaching the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it's out of the norm for what the Pittsburgh Steelers routinely do.
And if you go back even further, Leger, you look at what he did as an offensive coordinator with New Orleans during the Aaron Brooks era, had that offense #1 with Deuce McAllister and Aaron Brooks and Joe Horn. So he's someone that can get your offense on the right track and also help your quarterback settle in. Whoever that quarterback may be for Pittsburgh, Mike McCarthy is the right guy to develop that guy, have that guy playing his best. We saw him do that in Green Bay. We saw him do it in New Orleans, I just mentioned. We've seen him do it in Dallas. Even when he had to go without Dak Prescott, guess who stepped up and played really well? Cooper Rush. So he is someone that gets you ready to go, raises the floor of your franchise. He was actually the one that I thought would have been a great hire for the Cleveland Browns. Funny enough, he stays within that division, goes to Pittsburgh. I think this is a huge signing, a good one for Pittsburgh, in my opinion.
It's a good signing for Pittsburgh, but like you laid out there, Lee J, it's out of the norm for them. Normally they're grabbing those young DCs, but they will.
At this point, the reaction feels mostly positive. They're talking a lot about Mike McCarthy's experience and his history of winning, especially the Super Bowl. It sounds like the Steelers are going with someone they trust, even if it's different from what they usually do.
Lean on his Super Bowl pedigree, so we'll have to see how this works out. But one thing I find interesting is the connection to Aaron Rodgers. So, Lee J, I'll start with you. Do you think that him coming back has any effect on Rodgers, or actually McCarthy joining the team has any effect on Rodgers when it comes to coming back with the black and yellow or maybe retiring? Do they still have a good relationship?
Mox, it's so funny you asked that question, because when Mike Tomlin decided to leave the game of football and step away, I said, there's no way Aaron Rodgers is coming back. And then we're looking at this coaching carousel, and I'm looking at this list, and I'm like, but what if Coach McCarthy goes to the Steelers? Like, him and Aaron Rodgers do have a good relationship. Let's not forget, he decided to go with Aaron Rodgers over Brett Favre, even though Brett Favre decided to come back to play for Green Bay. You know, he retired, decided to unretire and come back. And Aaron Rodgers, I believe, was going into his 4th year. And McCarthy decided, you know what, we're going to go with the young Aaron Rodgers. And then that propelled them to multiple MVPs, also propelled them to a Super Bowl. So if there's any coach besides Tomlin that could get Aaron Rodgers to think about maybe not retiring now, it's Mike McCarthy. So this may be a strategic move by the Pittsburgh Steelers, because to Emery's point earlier, we don't know who their quarterback is going to be. Aaron Rodgers signed a one-year deal. Yes, they have Will Howard on roster. They drafted him this past year, I believe, in the 6th round, and Mason Rudolph on the roster as well. But if you're looking for a guy to come in and have that veteran pedigree like Rodgers, what better coach than Mike McCarthy? And then maybe you draft the quarterback of the future in the 1st round this year if you're able to do that, and he sits a year watching Aaron Rodgers.
And you think about how Rodgers used to defend Mike McCarthy during their time together in Green Bay. So, yeah, he does have a good relationship with him. And this just makes a lot of sense to me if you're Pittsburgh, because you have a guy that understands the culture and would like to continue to play. We saw the better version of Aaron Rodgers. He still has a lot left to give, in my opinion, and this makes the decision a lot easier for him to say, okay, I can give it one more go with a guy that I know, and that guy entrusts me to do what I need to do to get the offense where it needs to be. Therefore, he can focus on the defense. He can focus on the roster building. He knows what type of receivers I like, what type of offense I like. And I do feel as though the fact that, hey, sometimes you got to break what you're used to doing if you want to get somewhere different. There's a great book called, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And we've seen what has gotten the Steelers to where they are currently. Maybe they zig a little bit instead of zagging, and they hit a home run with Mike McCarthy.
Well, Mike McCarthy certainly will bring an offensive overhaul to this team, kind of shifting away from their recent run-first, more conservative offense under Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin. So you got to think that that is going to be more attractive to someone like Aaron Rodgers. But, Lige, you hit on it already about drafting the quarterback of the future. Do you think that that will be a top priority for Pittsburgh?
It probably will be, Mox. The only thing is there's probably only 2 guys that are worthy of a 1st-round pick, right? And everybody assumes Fernando Mendoza is going 1 overall. Ty Simpson, I believe the Steelers are picking at 20, if I'm not mistaken. Will he still be there? Emory, the one thing we know about teams, they get desperate when it comes to needing a quarterback, right? So teams like the Miami Dolphins who pick ahead of them, teams like the Jets who have 2 first-round picks, could they potentially be in on Ty Simpson? You see Josh Edwards actually has Ty Simpson going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which would make a lot of sense, especially if Aaron Rodgers comes back. So I do believe that's where they will target. The only thing is
Here, the conversation starts leaning more toward the quarterback situation. The idea that McCarthy could help stabilize whoever plays QB really stands out. It feels like the Steelers might be trying to raise the floor of the team instead of completely starting over.
They may have to get aggressive because, to my point earlier, Emory, teams get desperate when it comes to needing a quarterback.
Yeah, if you think about it, Leger, when you look at Ty Simpson perhaps going to Pittsburgh, it does make some sense there. But I would throw this name out because, again, the reason why I led with Aaron Brooks, and then you look at Aaron Rodgers, athletic quarterback. You look at Dak Prescott, athletic quarterback. There's a guy that you can get late on day 2, maybe even early day 3, in Taylor Green out of Arkansas, 6'6", 225, plays a lot like Randall Cunningham. Therefore, you don't have to go and reach because you know you have Aaron Rodgers, and you know what that looked like when you drafted Rodgers when Favre was still there, how contentious that was to start. So Rodgers may want you to, hey, we need better help here. Go here in the 1st round, and we're now looking at McCarthy being more, reluctant to go somewhere else in terms of quarterback and just say, okay, we'll get Rodgers what he wants for this 1st-round pick, and we'll get a developmental guy. You have Will Howard already in-house. I think they don't reach for a quarterback, but there's options there because of who is the head coach. You trust his development with whoever they have on that roster and whoever they're going to bring in to compete for that QB2 role or QB of the future role. So I like the fact that they do have options now. I would keep an eye on Taylor Green, especially if he has a fantastic Senior Bowl week, which I expect.
Well, let's just say there is a reunion with Rodgers and McCarthy here. What is this offense going to look like? Because McCarthy leans heavily on play action, top 10 usage rates in the recent years, which is a departure, I guess I would say, from Pittsburgh's shotgun-heavy tendencies that made them very predictable. So, Lige, what does this offense look like with Aaron Rodgers and McCarthy back together?
I mean, they've had a lot of success in the past, Mox. And then when you look at Arthur Smith's offense, it was a blend last year between what Aaron Rodgers likes to do and also what Arthur Smith likes to do. Arthur Smith likes to come out in multiple tight end sets. That's not something that Aaron Rodgers, by trade, loves to do. So Mike McCarthy's offense won't be too far off as far as the heavy play action pass, because that's the realm Arthur Smith wanted to live in. And we saw Aaron Rodgers have a lot of success under center and play action pass. They were in shotgun a lot, and because Aaron Rodgers likes to decipher what the defense is in. But I think that marriage would work perfect because they've done it before. They've won a Super Bowl together. So I believe Aaron Rodgers will have some freedom to change some of the plays and be a little bit more free in shotgun, but there'll also be those elements like you talked about, Mox, of the heavy play action pass as well.
They're going to have to find someone outside of DK Metcalf in terms of creating that dual threat type of passing attack. And I think that's where Mike McCarthy comes into play. He's more apt to work on the outside as opposed to working on the interior with those tight ends like Arthur Smith loves to do. And I think that opens up the door for Aaron Rodgers to have even better numbers in 2026 if he comes back, because we know they're going to invest in getting better on the perimeter outside of Metcalf, and that now opens up the entire offense. So I'm excited for what potentially could be if Rodgers comes back, because I know which way they're going to go to try to enhance his experience in what could also be his last season playing professional football. But receiver, outside working in, the run game is going to be a lot better. It's going to look more cohesive as an offense than what we've seen so far under Arthur Smith.
All right, fellas, let's look at the whole division here, right? Because the Ravens made their new hire with their head coach. You got to see the Steelers now, of course, Mike McCarthy there. That leaves the Browns. The Browns have been on the market for a head coach longer than anybody else. I would argue that this is one of the least attractive jobs in the NFL, given the history and then also the quarterback situation that's coming up this year. Are you worried about what's going to happen with Cleveland, Lige?
I would say slightly worried, just because we're getting into the...
This is where Aaron Rodgers becomes a bigger part of the discussion. The connection between Rodgers and McCarthy makes things interesting, but it also feels risky. It sounds like a move that could help in the short term, but there's still a lot of uncertainty about the long-term plan.
Think of this, Mox, where coaching positions are getting filled left and right as far as the head coaching position. To Emery's point, I thought Mike McCarthy, honestly, would be better suited at maybe Cleveland, Atlanta, or Tennessee, somewhere that had young quarterbacks that were already kind of established, because we saw what he did with Dak Prescott when he was with the Dallas Cowboys, and also what he did with Aaron Rodgers at Green Bay. So there is some concerns. And then also, Mox, the point that you didn't even bring up, there were guys that were turning down interviews, right, for the Cleveland job. So that is always a concern as well. And you see it right there, there's still 4 available jobs right now: the Cardinals, Raiders, Browns. Bills kind of got into this thing late with a late firing of Sean McDermott. But if you're the Cleveland Browns, there are some concerns because candidates are turning down interviews. They're not even willing to meet with your team.
I wouldn't be as concerned, because I think the fallback option for Cleveland is Jim Schwartz being the head football coach.
Yeah.
I also look at the guys that they're bringing in that they can't talk to yet in terms of in person. Shieldhouse, who's a fantastic quarterback at Illinois, is with the Rams, and also Udinsky, who's with Jacksonville, who looks like a young, up and coming coach. So they still can go that route, and Jim Schwartz can be the DC, or Jim Schwartz can be the head coach, and one of these guys that they're waiting to interview can still be the OC in Cleveland. I think Cleveland is sitting in the catbird seat, and I like how they're actually taking their time, because you don't want to rush this approach. If you want to keep up with what's going on in your division, Pittsburgh and Baltimore, hire a coach and let that coach rock out for a decade plus. Do it right, do it light, do it wrong, do it long. We've seen them do it long a lot. So if they're doing it right, maybe this is the last time we see them go through this process for a decade.
My guy Emery Hunt sounded like Dr. Seuss up in here. All right, so from maybe the least attractive coaching job to the most attractive coaching job that is left in the market, and that has to be the Buffalo Bills, as they have parted ways with McDermott. Would you say that this definitely is the number one job to get out there right now? And if it's not, Lige, which team is?
Yeah, without a doubt. Anytime you have a former MVP at quarterback, it's the number one job or the most coveted job. But there are some concerns with the Buffalo Bills. The main concern for me is there's been talks about Josh Allen being in some of these interviews with potential head coaching candidates. And to me, right there, you're kind of rubbing the lines of responsibility of the head coach versus a player, right? At what job does an employee get to interview his head coach? Now, I'm not saying that the GM and ownership shouldn't talk to Josh and tell them what they're thinking and then also get some information from him about what he's thinking. But for Josh Allen to sit in these meetings, Mox and Emery, what happens if things go left in the first 3 years and Josh was on board with taking his head coach? Does he get the fallout from it not working? I just think right there you're muddling the lines between player and head coach when you have a player specifically in head coaching interviews to potentially be the head coach of your next team. I think that's a decision that the front office and the GM should make. And then, of course, you get some information from your quarterback, but I don't believe he should be sitting in those meetings.
Especially if the owner and the GM seems like they are on the same page, where the owner is speaking for the GM. I don't want no parts of that situation, regardless of who on the roster. You know, the GM seems like, things don't go right. Well, it's really the head coach, and they'll fire you, and then now you're off, doing God knows whatever, and the GM is still there, may even get another promotion, right? Like he did in this situation. I think the best two jobs, to be completely honest, Cleveland and Arizona. We talked about Cleveland a little bit, but let's talk about Arizona. They have a really good roster on both sides of the ball. You just have to make sure you nail the quarterback position. And when I say nail the position, you just need consistency. You can't go out chasing the ghost of, we got to get a franchise guy. We got to get this guy this myth of a guy that lives in the hills. Just get you someone that can play their 111, and the rest of the roster looks really well. They've drafted excellent the last 4 draft cycles. That's why that team is on the cusp. And I like the way they're set up out there. Plus, in Arizona, no one's talking about you, so you kind of do what you want out there. Jonathan Gannon just got caught in the crosshairs and got fired, but that's a job where you could be under the radar and have success. The Cleveland side of things, they're coming off a great draft. The Deshaun Watson contract is going to be off the books after next season, so you have an influx of cash flow. You're moving into a dome stadium, so you have a chance to really do something that no one has been able to do since Schottenheimer in the 80s with the Cleveland Browns. So I feel like that's a spot in Arizona for the reasons I listed why. But I would say far away from Buffalo until Brandon Beane gets out of there, because I don't like that situation of how they got rid of McDermott, and then they like that press conference afterwards where they blame Keon Coleman, who's still on the roster, by the way. They blame him for everything.
Crazy.
I would stay away from that completely.
I will say the fans put together a petition as well, and I believe it's like something like 65,000 or 6,500 fans have said that they want McDermott back in that role. But just recapping here, we got McCarthy to the Steelers, Harbaugh to the Giants, Jesse Minter to the Ravens, Jeff Hafley to the Dolphins, Robert Saleh, of course, to the Titans, and Kevin Stefanski to the Atlanta Falcons. But there are more coaching availability. Thanks for stopping by, Lee J and Emery here. Here is the look at head coaching carousel, as we have seen here and as I just laid out. And the Steelers are interesting because this is just the 4th coach that they have had.
Overall, this debate shows why the Mike McCarthy hire is such a big deal for the Steelers. He brings experience, stability, and a winning background, but he also represents a different approach than what the team usually does. That's exciting for some fans and worrying for others. In the end, it all comes down to whether this move is about winning now or building for the future. Steelers fans are going to be watching every step closely. Let me know what you think. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more NFL reactions.